Good afternoon, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you this afternoon to our presentation on advanced care planning, specifically looking at the issue of pre-need funerals. So I thought we would start out today looking at how much does a funeral cost. And in Colorado, there are several websites that one can look at. I selected Funeralocity. So the average for a traditional full-size funeral is about $7,049. For a full-service cremation, excuse me, it's $5,736. An affordable burial is $3,628, and a direct cremation is $1,682. So the next thing I thought we would take a look at is, what do these terms mean and what are the differences? So a traditional full-service burial is probably what most of us are familiar with. This one of the things to know about the funeral industry is that they charge for services, and they are required by state law to itemize all of those services. So they charge for, in a traditional full service burial, removal of the body from the place where the individual passed away. There's usually a basic service fee, and that's kind of like just covers the professional services, the staff, the building, those kinds of things. There's a charge for the casket. There is a charge for embalming, as well as caring for the body, which includes things like getting the hair ready, dressing the individual, laying out what they call laying out the individual, meaning whether they have to do anything around the smiles or if they have to cover up any type of facial discolorations or any of those kinds of things. If there's a visitation, or in the event of a Catholic service, a wake, if there's a church or chapel service, whether either on or off the premises, a funeral procession to the gravesite, and committal services, basically meaning lowering the casket into the grave. They do not, and whatever services might be involved at the gravesite. So a full service cremation, basically, this is a cremation in which there is a service, usually either in the church or in a chapel in the funeral home, that includes the cremains as well as the funeral service directors. So again, we're paying for a visitation or a wake prior to the service, any kind of use of the church or a chapel, the basic cremation services, removal of the body, transfer of the body from the funeral home to the crematorium, a cremation casket, some type of a box with the cremains. And then if you want an urn, that is usually extra. A direct cremation then differs in the sense that this includes removal of the body, again, from the place where the individual is deceased, transfer straight to the crematory. There is no stopping, if you will, at the funeral home itself. And then you have the cremation services. The ashes are returned in some type of a box. There's no committal services or anything that the funeral home is involved with, and the urn then is extra. And then there's also what they call an affordable burial or intermediate or direct burial. And this is very similar to the direct cremation, except in this situation, there is a cremation casket involved. and there is a funeral procession to a cemetery or a gravesite. So the last two are a little bit different, but again, what you see in the difference in price is primarily the involvement of the funeral. One of the things to be extremely aware of when you are looking at a pre-need funeral is what are all the different types of charges. The biggest charge that you will encounter is some type of a casket. So if you buy a metal casket, you're probably or a steel casket, you're looking at anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000. And I'm going to give you a little hint here because I have what they call picked many funerals in my life. Picking a funeral basically means that you go to the funeral home and you make all of the arrangements. That is how it is referred to. The most expensive casket is usually always going to be the very first one that they show you when you go back to the casket viewing room. So if that particular casket is one that you like and you have the funding to pay for it, then feel free to do that. Otherwise, do not hesitate to walk through the funeral casket viewing room and see if there are others that are less expensive. A second type of merchandise is that if you do a cremation and you want an urn, there are a number of different types of urns. There are wood ones, ceramic ones, metal ones. Those tend to average around $295. Some people will select, excuse me, to be cremated, but they want to have a viewing. And in that case, they may rent a casket rather than actually purchasing one. So rental of a casket means that the funeral home has one that they have used for other individuals for the same purpose. And that runs around $1,000. There are then the basic memorial printed package. This is the cards, the memorial book, any type of notices in newspapers or whatever are usually extra. Notices on the funeral home's website are usually somewhat complimentary. Sometimes there's a video that goes with it. So it really kind of depends on what you choose and what you want. But the basic package usually runs around $175. Now, the next thing that if you are selecting a cremation that you need to look at is, do you want to purchase an actual cremation casket, or do you want to purchase some type of an alternative container? In either case, the crematory will burn the item. So if you purchase a cremation casket, usually that is a wood casket of some type. And there is a charge for that of about $1,200. Your alternative is to just use a paper box, and that is usually somewhere in the neighborhood of $100. There is a notion that if you use a paper box, it is actually much better on the environment. The body, the cremains burn quicker, and we use less energy to do that. Flowers are another thing that usually go with funerals, especially a traditional funeral. Flowers can usually be purchased through the funeral home, but my own experience is that there is a very significant markup. So I usually suggest that people who would like to have flowers on the casket, that they go to a local florist and have those delivered. Usually you can buy them significantly cheaper, and the florist will offer you oftentimes even free delivery to the funeral home. Now, I said earlier that the mortuary is required to give you an itemized charge. So what I have here is the itemization of the different charges that go into a basic funeral, the very first one that we looked at. So the basic fee just for using the funeral home in this instance is $1,805. The transport, picking up the body from the point where the individual passed away, is $365. If you have never done this in your past, that transport usually occurs by an individual. Sometimes there will be two people who will come to the home or the nursing home. They will come with a gurney. They will move the body onto a gurney, and they usually leave with either a panel wagon of some type or a some type of a van of some type. Usually it's just a single individual making that transfer. If you are going to have a traditional funeral or a viewing, state law requires that the body be embalmed. What embalming basically means is that they take out all of the blood and they put in the body a type of chemical, usually formaldehyde or something of that nature, which then keeps the body in its form for viewing and is safe then. In this instance, they're charging $676. The next one is a $300 charge for dressing and casketing. This is if the hair needs to be curled, if any clothing needs to be pressed, if there are, as I said earlier, any facial markings that need to be taken care of or anything like that. Again, if you've never been part of this, they never bury an individual with shoes. They will take a dress or a suit and they actually slit it down the back. They also do not usually bury individuals with any type of underwear. Again, don't be shocked if that's what they indicate to you. It's just part of the process. The viewing then is $321. If you have more than one viewing, you can expect this charge to be increased. This usually includes a private viewing for the family 1 or 2 hours before there's a public viewing service, which is usually for another couple of hours. There's a $538 charge for the ceremony. This is taking the body either to the church or using the chapel that is available on site. This does not usually include any type of charges for any ministers or priests, does not include any type of charges for music, for pallbearers. Any of those charges will be over and above these charges. One of the last funerals that I was involved with the expectation of paying for priests and pallbearers and musicians and those kinds of things was an extra $800. A charge for the hearse then, this is to go to the church as well as to go to the cemetery, was $342. The utility vehicle, this is usually the vehicle that they use to pick up the body, was $180. And then a medium priced casket here was $2,500. Again, obviously, if you purchase a more expensive casket, then it would be more expensive. So this is the type of list that you are required to receive from the funeral home so that you know what charges they are. In terms of planning for your funeral, these are also the kinds of charges that you will want to, that you will see, and that you then lock in at the prices that you purchase them. Some people think that just having the body taken care of at the funeral home is the only cost associated with a burial, but there is an additional charge for a burial plot if you are going to be buried in a cemetery, either in a traditional burial with a casket or in a urn with a cremation. So the average price in Colorado for a burial plot is around $2,399 based on an analysis of 256 cemeteries. And this particular survey was done by a group called Perfect Goodbyes. They said that in their research, the cemetery price ranged from $375 to $49,000. And as you can see on the right-hand side, the burial plots, they selected some cities within Denver or within Colorado. And as you can see, it varies significantly by where, which city you select, but it also varies significantly by the cemetery. So for example, Fairmont Cemetery is significantly more expensive than some of the other smaller cemeteries in Colorado. Now, you can be buried on another person's lot sometimes. So for example, if your parents are buried in a cemetery and you are having a cremation, some cemeteries will allow an urn to just be placed at the end of an existing plot. And then there is only a charge for opening and closing a grave. The cemeteries, in addition to the plot, are also going to charge you for opening and closing the grave. And that fee also can range anywhere from $300 to $1,000 or more, depending on what cemetery you use. So that is another charge that you need to be aware of when you are purchasing a pre-need funeral. You can be buried on private property in Colorado. There is no law that says that you have to be buried in a cemetery. So some people are able to take advantage of veterans, national and state cemeteries. They do offer free burial plots. They do not offer free funerals, but they do offer the opening and closing of the grave is free, and the burial stone is free if you are buried in either a national or a state cemetery. So these are the national cemeteries that we have in Colorado. There's Fort Logan in Denver, Fort Lyon in Los Animas, and Pikes Peak National Cemetery in Colorado Springs. All of them do have open plots at this point in time. In terms of the state VA cemeteries, there is one, the Veterans Cemetery in Grand Junction, and the Colorado State Veterans Cemetery in Home Lake. Both of those are the first one is funded by the VA. The second one is not funded, so there is a charge for that. The third big expense that one must be aware of when purchasing a funeral plan is a headstone or a grave marker. Again, depending on the type of headstone that you select, as well as the type of marble or material that you use. So a flat stone usually runs between $200 and $400 plus the placement fee. So this again can be several hundred more dollars $400 to $800 is kind of my experience. Some cemeteries will only allow a flat stone at this point in time. The reason for that being it's easier on maintenance because the lawnmowers can basically mow over the top of it. What they call a lawn headstone, or one that is raised, again, ranges anywhere from $600 to $2,000 or more, again, depending on the size, how elaborate you want it. But it can be $2,000 or more. Now, one of the things that many people are very concerned about in terms of grave markers is that the grave will sink over time. And if you have done anything like I have over the years, which is I have walked around many cemeteries because I am a genealogy nut, and that is where you get a lot of information. So one of the ways to keep a grave marker from sinking is to actually pay for a cement base. And that will be an extra cost. One of the other things that I forgot to mention on the previous slide when burying the casket is that some municipalities will also require either a metal frame that goes over the casket or some type of a cement base. So sometimes that is a requirement of the city ordinances. Engraving then, whatever you have on it, the individual's name, the family name, children's names, any memorial sayings, anything like that, that engraving is usually extra. In addition to that, if you have like a single grave for a couple and one person precedes the other, and you buy the marker at the time of the death of the first person, that when the second person passes away, then that engraving is extra. So again, what should you look for in terms of materials? Most mortuaries will offer just about everything you want. They'll do granite, bronze, marble, sandstone, slate, fieldstone, just about anything that you want. The literature says that if you want something to last forever, bronze is the most durable, although my own experience is that granite is pretty durable as well. And I have visited some cemeteries that have been around for 300 and 400 years, especially in Europe. So why should you have a prepaid funeral plan? Well, you can prepay it, and you basically reduce the financial stress when the family is grieving. I have to tell you that in personal family situations, when I have been involved and they were prepaid, it does make going to the mortuary and picking the funeral much easier because all of that is done, and you're not having to make those decisions when everybody is in distress. It allows you as an individual to also have more control over your own wishes and details of your funeral. So you can not only as part of this prepaid funeral pay for it in advance, but you can also at that point provide instructions, if you will, about the music that you would like to have played, the type of flowers that you would have, the information that you would like to have on the pre-printed memorial cards, any of those kinds of things. Another thing that happens when you do prepaid funerals is it actually gives you the opportunity to shop for funerals. And I know that that sounds maybe not something that you want to do, but I can tell you from experience just here in the Denver area, and having been a power of attorney for many people over the years who do not have family, there is a great deal of variation, even on the cheapest funerals to the most expensive funerals here in the Denver area. And so again, calling the different funeral homes once you have selected the type of funeral that you want, and shopping it may be very important to you. I have never had an experience where any funeral home that I worked with was able to go to any cemetery in the Denver area. I have done a couple of funerals where I have shipped the remains to other cemeteries in other states. And again, the funeral homes have been very willing and able to participate in that. Usually when I have shipped the cremains, the only thing they charge me for is the shipping charges. There's usually not any additional charges involved. One of the things, if you do a pre-need funeral, that you need to do, and you need to do this anyway, is that you need to have a will so that your heirs can actually execute your pre-need funeral and use your asset, which is your pre-need funeral, to pay for your wishes, rather than to have to use your other assets to pay for expenses. We are getting more and more reason for funeral homes to ask if you are the executor of the will, so that you can actually go ahead and execute the funeral. You should know that the power of attorney, whoever that is, dies at the point in time in which you pass away. And so in order to actually be able to bury you, the funeral home needs some type of direction, and that comes from your last will and testament. And so really just a way, your pre-need funeral is a way to just reduce stress for your loved ones. Now, how do we normally prepay for a funeral? So we have three options that we can use. We can use a pre-need funeral, we can use burial insurance, or we can use life insurance. Each of them have a specific benefit depending on what it is that you are wanting to achieve. So if you are buying a pre-need funeral, you will do that with a cemetery, or a mortuary. And you will want to verify with the Division of Insurance, unless you use a standard one like Archdiocese of Denver or Feldman or Olinger, or those that are around and have lots of offices in town. Then you don't need to verify them. But if you're using a small one and you're not sure about it, you can verify with the Division of Insurance that they are licensed. When you are purchasing this pre-need funeral, you will want to look at all of the list of items that you are purchasing. You will get that itemized list, and then you will basically make payments into a trust. You will want to know the name of that trust that the funeral home is using. Funeral homes traditionally will fund this pre-need funeral with a life insurance policy. This is the way basically that they are able to manage the costs. So if I buy a pre-need funeral today and I spend $1,500 for a cremation, and that's all I buy is a direct cremation, and then if I don't pass away for 20 years, they can't charge me more than that $15,000 or $1,500. And so the way that they do not lose money is by using a life insurance. Another thing to be aware of is that when you buy a pre-need funeral, because it is a type of insurance, and is regulated by the Division of Insurance, then they have to have a plan. If the company that you purchase from goes out of business, then there has to be an exit plan for how they will manage those trust funds and who will take those over. A pre-need funeral has the money available at the funeral home when you go to pay for it, or when you go to pick the funeral. You will want to follow this exact same process when purchasing a burial plot. And sometimes you buy those from the same cemetery, or the funeral company. So the Archdiocese of Denver, for example, will sell you the burial plot as well as a pre-need funeral. If you are buried in a different cemetery, sometimes if they're church related, then you buy the plot from the church. So again, it depends on where, what cemetery you're using, where you would buy the actual plot. And then similarly, you will want to follow pretty much the same scenario or the same sequence if you are buying a marker. And again, some funeral homes will sell the markers. Some cemetery owners will also sell the markers. The second way that we can pay for a lot is through burial insurance. And this is usually a whole life insurance policy specifically designed to cover costs for your funeral, your burial, and other end-of-life expenses. The cost is usually somewhere between $50 and $100 a month. Face value usually somewhere around $10,000. This is an asset, if you will. And so it accrues as you pay your monthly premiums, then the cash value of the burial plan increases. Different policies have different surrender values and terms. Some of them, for example, if you pass away within 30 days, it may or may not pay. So again, you just have to read the policy and make sure you understand what type of terms that you are purchasing. Sometimes a burial insurance will not pay. The primary thing that I have seen over the years is either a lapse in premium, or that if there's been a suicide or a homicide, but sometimes also they won't pay if there's either incorrect medical information or application errors or whatever. So again, making sure that when you purchase this, you check with the company, you check with the Division of Insurance, make sure that they're a company that's licensed to sell in Colorado, and that they have met the insurance requirements for the state. The third way that you can fund a funeral is either through whole life insurance or through term life insurance. Whole life insurance has a cash surrender value that you can use for whatever. So whole life, basically you pay in, and you pay usually a monthly premium until the face value is paid up, or sometimes there is a top end age restriction. Sometimes you just pay until, you just keep paying every month. A whole life policy can be used for many things other than for burial. So some people use whole life insurance as a way to not only cover their burial costs, but they'll also use it as a way to transfer wealth. And so you might see somebody who has $500,000 or $1 million life insurance policy, in which they intend for some portion of it to go for funeral expenses, but then for the balance of it to go to the beneficiaries that are named. It's important to know that life insurance passes outside of the will, meaning it is, although it's part of your estate, it is not part of your estate that has to be probated. A term life insurance is usually cheaper, and you usually pay for a period of time. There is no cash value in a term life insurance until you are deceased, and it too passes outside of the will. Again, term life insurance can have a value much greater than any cost for burial. So it may be another way to transfer wealth between generations. So a pre-need funeral contract is a contract basically that is written. It's an agreement for future services for a beneficiary before sometime in the future. I've bought pre-need funerals 30 days before somebody has passed away, and I've helped to buy them 20 years in advance. So sometimes people ask, where do I find a funeral home in Colorado? So the Colorado Funeral Directors Association has a list of all of the licensed funeral homes in Colorado. So this is a live link, and if you when you get the slides, if you wish to click on the link, you can find the list of licensed facilities in Colorado. As part of the planning for a pre-need funeral, you also will want to think about the death certificate. So the death has to be recorded with the Colorado Department of Public Health within 5 days of the death, and they have to get the death certificate back at the crematory or the mortuary before the body can be buried or cremated. So it's usually a pretty quick process. The funeral home takes care of all of that. A death certificate does have to be signed by the physician on the cause of death prior to the medical or prior to the death certificate being recorded, and that has to happen within 48 hours. So an individual passes away, the mortuary is called, they start the process of a death certificate, they get it to the physician for signing, and then most of the time they hand carry them to the Colorado Department of Public Health. If for some reason there's an autopsy and the coroner is unable to meet the 48-hour requirement, they will let the mortuary know. Currently, the fee for a death certificate in Colorado is $20 for the first certificate and $13 for additional copies. Depending again on the individual, how many copies of the death certificate you need. Some entities will ask for an original, some will ask for a copy, and then they'll just they'll ask for an original and make a copy. I gave you the link here also of the Colorado Department of Public Health, where you basically can get copies of the death certificate if you do not request enough. Another thing that is sometimes helpful, sometimes the mortuaries will help with this. Sometimes you are kind of on your own for it. The mortuaries are required to notify Social Security of your death if you are receiving, or regardless, they whatever age you are, the mortuary is required to notify Social Security. This is basically an attempt, as you may guess, to make sure that people who are deceased are no longer excuse me, receiving Social Security benefits, that no one is tampering with their Social Security account, either making deposits on it or that there's any type of fraud or anything going on. Other types of places that have to be notified and may request copies of death certificates are financial companies. If there's any insurance companies, you want to report to credit reporting agencies, memberships again. And I just gave you a link to a checklist that was pretty comprehensive and one that I've used a few times over the years. There is the Colorado Office of Funeral Home and Crematory Registration, and this is run out of the Colorado Division of Insurance. So they are responsible for licensing funeral homes and crematories. So you can check to see if they are licensed. If they are applying for a new license, you can also get into the various laws and rules and regulations. There are, from time to time, funeral homes that also do not follow the rules. So the division and this particular office is responsible for any type of discipline and enforcement. And that unfortunately does happen. So just kind of in summary, a prepaid funeral is limited to the funeral home. But again, I have had no problem transferring them. So for example, if somebody dies in Colorado and they have a policy with Haran and Makani, and they pass away in another state, I haven't had any problem with people or with companies transferring them. There's no additional benefits. Whatever you paid for, you receive. And if you want, if your beneficiaries or your loved ones want to add benefits, they can certainly do that unless it is irrevocable. If it's revocable, then anybody can add to it. If it's irrevocable, then what's on the existing funeral plan is what will be available. The money is paid directly to the funeral home. The good thing is that the prices are set. And once you have done your shopping, you don't have to look any further. And the benefits only go to the funeral home. Make sure you know that. And if the funeral home is only handling the burial, then you'll need to work with either another company for a marker and a burial plot, or sometimes they can handle all three. Prepaid funeral home plans have no cash value, meaning that basically you can't cash them in. Now, one of the things that does get in trouble for people is that if you are on Medicaid, the cash value of a prepaid funeral plan does count towards your $2,000 assets that you're allowed to keep. So the workaround for that is you call the funeral company and you ask them to make that irrevocable. And then once it is irrevocable, it is no longer considered an asset for Medicaid purposes. And I have never worked with a funeral home in Colorado that was not aware of that. Over the last 25 or 30 years, they have understood that that was a Medicaid requirement, and they usually will provide you the documentation very quickly. If you have funeral or life insurance, this is more flexible, if you will, and you can transfer it. You can get cash value out of it. Money is paid directly to the beneficiary, and then the beneficiary is required, if you will, to pay for the funeral expenses. It does allow you to do price shopping after the person has passed away or in anticipation of their passing. The death benefit, whatever it is, can be split. And if you have a whole life policy, there is cash value that will build up. If you have a term policy, then it will be whatever the amount of the term that was originally purchased. So with that, that pretty much concludes my comments on pre-need funerals. This is just a couple of slides on some of the programming that we at the Gerontological Society provide. And so you're welcome to ask for any kind of support and services. I will mention that on our website at senioranswers.org, there is an advanced care planning toolkit. In addition to information around guardianships, powers of attorney, how to fill those documents out, that kind of thing. There's also information on last will and testament, bank accounts, and some of that kind of information, forms that you need to file those various documents. On our YouTube channel at CO Gerontology, there is also a number of YouTube YouTube videos on our playlists that cover a lot of these same topics. If you have additional questions around advanced care planning, feel free to give our office a call. we can certainly walk you through some of these steps, or we can mail you some of the forms if you're not able to get them off of our website. And this is a little bit more about our programming and some of the different programs that we offer. If you are interested in engaging with them, any of those, please either give us a call, or if you would like any of those resources, please visit our website, and there's information out there on that. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and it looks like there are no questions in the chat. So does anyone have any questions that you would like to pose at this moment? Okay, we will make the video as well as the slides available either later today or tomorrow if you registered for the meeting today. In addition to that, they will be posted on our YouTube channel on CO Gerontology, and so you can visit them there. Someone did just put a message in the chat and said, can family members do the dressing of the deceased person? And the answer is usually yes, but that is something you will need to clarify with the mortuary that you are working with. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for joining us today, and good luck. We'll see you soon.